Hello everyone, DarkOfAllTrades here. Today I'm looking at a video from a channel called AlphaCenturian. The video seems to be a response to someone, but it has questions directed at atheists and agnostics in general, so I'm going to cut out the initial preamble and get right to the questions. I don't know a lot about this person, though he makes mention multiple times to being Catholic or having ties to being Catholic, but he seems fairly well spoken, and in some of his other videos, he dives into some more advanced terminology used in apologetics, and at the beginning, he talks a lot about how he feels the discourse between atheists and theists on YouTube seems to be stagnating or dying out. Well, AlphaCenturian, why do you think that is? I would venture a guess and say that it's because all of the arguments made by theists are at least 100 years old and have been dealt with over and over again, shown to be flawed, but for some reason theists can't seem to accept that there are problems and keep trying to put forth these flawed ideas. Well, maybe you've got some good questions, so let's take a look.
So, question 1. On the objection of hell. If someone going to hell, whatever you think hell is, was truly just by whatever your definition of just is. And here, so that way there's not any confusion, what I'm meaning by just is that only the unrepentant criminals of the worst kind would even be eligible for hell, i.e. serial murderers, serial sexual abusers, and those who willfully physically torture the innocent. The rest would be given a simple choice at the end of their life, either heaven or oblivion, depending on their eligibility for either. Would this erase, or at least ease, your current objection to hell?
I took some time to consider this because, due to the wording, he makes it sound not so bad. Only bad people get punished, and the rest can repent and go to heaven or get annihilated. That sounds like a pretty good deal, right? Well, it does until you think about it for just a little bit. Sure, it reduces the number of good people that go to hell just because they don't believe in a god, or for the myriad of other reasons why your god would normally send someone to hell, but there are still major issues. At the bare minimum, your god made people the way they are. If nothing can happen that isn't according to your God's plan, then these people could not help but do these awful things. According to the Bible, your God has interfered with free will before, so why not do it again? Even outside of that, if I grant the notion that your God does not interfere with free will, your God could just make whatever bad thing they were going to do not possible for them to do. Humans can't fly under our own power, so make whatever awful thing like that. No interrupting free will, just negating the ability to do a bad thing. Getting away from the idea of free will entirely, your hypothetical still retains one of the major objections to the idea of hell. Anything done on Earth would be considered a finite crime. Hell would be considered an infinite punishment for this finite crime. The punishment is not proportionate to the crime or crimes. Any human would still maintain some form of empathy. Knowing that people are suffering the worst tortures forever would put a real damper on the idea of eternal happiness in heaven. These people suffering forever likely had families who cared about them and would not be able to be happy knowing this terrible fate. Without empathy, I would not be me. Therefore, I would suffer knowing that one person is in hell. However, there is an easy loophole. The Bible even states in Ephesians 2, 8-9, "For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourself. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast." So as I covered in a previous video, according to the Bible, what you do on earth has no bearing on whether you get to heaven. So you could have a mass murderer, psychopath, abuser, whatever horrible qualities you want to apply to someone, and on their deathbed, if they accept your Jesus, then it's up to heaven they go. The very idea that a single person suffers infinitely is abhorrent. Punishments are deterrents. While the US does it wrong, the prison system is supposed to be for rehabilitation into society. In your scenario, it is far better for anyone to just be annihilated in any situation than for a single person to go to hell.
Question number 2. On the legitimacy of the Bible. If the Bible were accurate by modern scholarly standards of history, would it matter who the authors are? Again, I am not making a claim that it's accurate. I am not talking about the Catholic claim that each book is a different genre. I'm not doing any of that. I'm simply asking, from your point of view, if the Bible were accurate by modern scholarly standards of history? Would it even matter who the authors are?
Before answering this, I have to point out that I do not accept the possibility of the hypothetical. The Bible has many contradictions, so if we grant one claim is correct, then another claim cannot be correct. In John 1:18 it says, "No man hath seen God at any time." But Genesis 32:30 says, "I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved." Both of these statements cannot be true at the same time. For this question, it would be akin to asking, suppose a married bachelor exists. This cannot be true. However, if I ignore all of the contradictions and just talk about what he wants me to talk about, my initial reaction is no. It would not matter who the authors are if we could determine that the claims were correct. The trouble here is that we do not have verification that the claims are correct, and for many, we know they are not correct. When we investigate something that is said to have happened in history, we rely on writings from the time which that event happened. With famous figures, if we have writings from anonymous people that something happened, we take that into consideration, but we don't just accept it, especially if there are no other sources on the subject. How do we know anyone existed in history? We look for known scholars that would have written about that subject at that time. If we find them, then we generally accept that this person likely existed. If we don't find them, then the claims are very suspect at that point. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence unless there is an absence of evidence where we would expect evidence to be. In this question, you are bypassing the need to know who the authors are by granting that what is written is correct. So you're making a circular question by saying, if it didn't matter who the authors are, would it matter who the authors are?
Question number 3, on inerrancy. If you found out that inerrancy, as understood and defined by American Christians, and specifically those Christians in evangelical and fundamentalist circles, was not the way most Christians throughout history understood the Bible, and that even today most Christians in the world don't view the Bible that way, would that change your opinion on the reasonableness of Christianity and its adherents?
The Bible is wholly irrelevant to whether some form of Christianity is true or not, or whether there's a God or not. The Bible is the claim that some people make. If someone claims a God exists, then they should be able to demonstrate this, or at minimum explain why they believe a God exists. That demonstration or that reasoning is either sufficient or it isn't. The Bible never needs to come into play. I have watched interactions with proclaimed atheistic Christians. It sounds a bit strange, but I get it. They accepted that Jesus existed and was a great teacher and think his teachings should be followed, but don't accept the God claims. The issue with Christianity is that it makes claims it cannot back up. Barring the atheistic Christian example, the idea of a God is either true or not true, and Christians believe it to be true, but cannot provide anything but terribly flawed arguments or appeals to personal experiences that they have also can't show actually happened. So no, it would not change my opinion on the reasonableness of Christianity, even granting that a guy named Yeshua ben Joseph existed and was a traveling preacher/rabbi, and even that this guy had some good ideas for how to live life, ignoring the terrible ones. Then it doesn't show anything for the case other than just that. There was a guy who had some ideas that some people really liked.
Question number 4. If it was demonstrable that Christian morals and ethics required adherent Christians to love, respect, and care for homosexual, that is the LGB, and for transgendered individuals, and for child orphans, and the homeless, and widows from its foundation, that means from the foundation of Christianity, up to today, would this change your view of Christians from negligent, fearful hate mongers to diligent, courageous, compassionate individuals? Let me simplify that, just because I know that I used a lot of wording there. An objection that we hear a lot, or that I hear a lot, about Christianity, and this is from the staunch atheist, is that Christianity is actually hateful and fearful, and that Christians themselves are negligent of people's needs. So the question is, if it turned out And I'm not saying this is true or false. I'm saying for you, if you found out and it turned out provably that the Christian ethic from its foundation was to love, respect, and care for homosexual individuals, for transgendered individuals, child orphans, the homeless, and widows, would this change your opinion on Christians to a more positive one?
If you could prove that Christians were better people than they are, would that change my opinion on them to a more positive one? That seems like a bit of a silly question. I take great issue with anyone using religion or a book to be bigots or discriminate against another group of people, especially when it is for something that those people cannot help, such as skin color or sexual orientation or attraction. These people hide behind the excuse that it is what their God thinks. If you reverse these people's positions, of course I would think more positively of them. This is almost the same as the second question. If a group of people were better people, would you think more positively of them? Yes, of course. The issue is that it still doesn't change the other terrible parts of Christianity. Some people wouldn't care why you do good things as long as you do them, and I generally agree. I would argue that motive does matter. If the reason you are doing something good is not to help someone or for the betterment of mankind, but for the hope of some reward in an afterlife, or even some selfish personal gain now, then I have a problem with that way of thinking. It should be addressed. I want you to do things for a good reason. However, if the only reason you're not a mass murderer is because you think your God doesn't want you to be a mass murderer, then I want you to keep believing in that God.
Okay. And then finally, question number 5 on literalism. If I could show you that Christians and Jewish people from the oldest records up until the Reformation, and the majority of Christians up until the advent of American Puritanism, did not read the Bible as absolutely literal, but instead viewed each book as its own genre, with its own tropes and allegories, much like epic poetry, that contained and transmitted truth through narrative. Would this change your opinion on the intelligence and reasoning skills of the average Christian? Now, note, on the question on inerrancy, I hit very hard that I was not talking about genres. Here, I am, on literalism, I'm asking about if it turns out that each book is its own genre, and that not every book is meant to be taken literal, and that there are signs, literary signposts in the text that tell you what's supposed to be literal and what's supposed to be epic poetry. If that's in the Bible, and I can prove it to you, would that change your opinion on the intelligence and reasoning skills of the average Christian? Because there's a lot of bad faith and a lot of bad blood that happens when atheists are speaking among themselves on their own channels. You seem to really concentrate, from the channels that I've watched, they seem to really concentrate on the lack of intelligence and lack of reasoning skills of the average Christian. We're not talking about the top scholars, we're talking about the average Christian.
Maybe? I don't think the average Christian thinks enough about the Bible to take it as entirely literal. I doubt the average Christian knows more than what they hear about in popular culture, or for the ones that attend church regularly, just what they hear about in church on top of popular culture. My grandparents were very active in their church. My grandmother was the choir leader for many years. Even then, outside of saying grace at meals or talking about church events, the idea of the Bible or even their religion pretty much never came up. The average Christian in the US is less active than they were, so I doubt they think that in depth about the Bible. The issue I have with the reasoning skills of the average Christian is when I ask why they believe what they do. Each belief comes from somewhere, and if they can't show good reasons behind what they believe, then I question their reasoning skills. Even the brightest, most intelligent person has flaws in their reasoning in some areas. I have been shown to have flawed reasoning before, and I'm sure I will again, but I firmly believe that everything I accept as true, I can provide the evidence or reasoning behind it, and if someone can point out an actual issue with my logic, I will change my mind. The trouble is that most people who disagree with me cannot point out the issue. It's more of a difference of opinion. When it comes to the claim that a God exists, the reasoning is insufficient for me, and I believe anyone to believe. The trouble is there are so many reasons why a person believes in things that don't or haven't been shown to exist that it takes more than just me and my oratory/conversation skills to convince them otherwise.
All right, those are my 5 questions. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please comment down below if you are someone who still has a YouTube channel. I know a lot of people don't anymore, but if you still have a YouTube channel and you're an individual user and you want to answer this, please do. Go ahead and put your link in the comments down below, and I will approve them as fast as I can, so that way you can share those videos and that way people can watch and interact. Bye.
That's all for the questions for this one. AlphaCenturian, you seem like a genuine person who really cares about the well-being of people. Just based on the little I've seen, you seem to care about knowledge and learning as well as rationally working together with kindness. Honestly, you seem like the kind of person who would truly set aside the differences of religious and non-religious, theists and atheists, and focus on the good that people can do in the world. I think what is true matters to you, and you believe in what you say, but are open to constructive conversation. And even if we disagree on certain topics, you're the kind of person to be right there to help me if I needed it. The world needs people like you. Respect. For everyone else, what did you think? Do you think his questions were thoughtful and thought-provoking? Do you think I nailed the answers, or do you think I missed something that you caught? Do you have a different answer than what I put? Let me know in the comments. I love reading those answers that differ from my own. As per usual, thank you so much for watching. Hit that like button to encourage a positive opinion, and you can show a positive change in reasoning and intelligence by subscribing. As always, keep learning.